My name is Joe Kelly. I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Jewish, Christian, Muslim Relations at Merrimack College in North Andover, Massachusetts. And on behalf of the college, our provost, Dr. Alan Weatherwax, is here to give some words of welcome. Alan?
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure this evening, on behalf of Merrimack College, to congratulate Joshua, Sam, and Robin. Merrimack College is a Catholic college founded by the Order of St. Augustine. For many years now, our partnership with the Grieve Foundation has allowed us to extend our educational mission beyond the 4,000 students to wider civic circles and in many religious and cultural communities. A deep and profound respect for every person is at the heart of our mission to enlighten minds, engage hearts, and empower lives. As educators, we prize your work that challenges our society to welcome our Muslim brothers and sisters as equal members of our democratic republic. You call all Americans to the mutual understanding and respect that is essential for the future of an increasingly diverse society. Thank you again for excellence in your work, for your dedication to the profession, and for helping lead the way to a more open, welcoming, and stronger America. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. For about 8 years, Merrimack College has offered the Goldziher Prize to scholars, writers, and activists who work on behalf of inclusion, and tolerance, and understanding of difference. With the support of the William and Mary Grieve Foundation, we've been able to honor people from many walks of life, and this year we honor 3 journalists. The 20th century French writer and provocateur Marguerite Duras once remarked that journalism without a moral position is impossible. Every journalist is a moralist, she said. It's unavoidable. Our 3 Goldziher Prize winners have taken a moral position on the issue of religious and cultural inclusion in our republic. Chosen by a jury of their peers, they are honored both for their craft and for their ethic, and for the courage and commitment that is essential to a free society such as ours. As Jeff mentioned, today, May 3rd, is National World Press Freedom Day. How appropriate a day to honor our 3 winners. We celebrate the work of documentary filmmaker Joshua Seftel and the work of journalists Sam Freedman and Robin Wright. It's my pleasure to introduce our MC for the evening, and we're very, very fortunate that he could join us. Wajahat Ali, journalist, TV host, award-winning playwright, and get this, an attorney. You're an attorney? Wow. Then we're all in trouble. Wajahat.
Thank you, Joe. Your check is in the mail, sir. How's everyone doing? Wow, thank you for that overwhelmingly enthusiastic response. That was just calm down. Take it down a notch there. That group's in a coma. That's fine. You guys are all asking the same question right now. You're looking at me. You're thinking, wait, he isn't Hassan Minhaj. No, I'm not Hassan Minhaj. I'm also not Riza Ahmed, and I'm not Reza Aslan. I'm the guy you get when the rest of them say no. So I'm honored to be your 4th, desperate, last choice for tonight's MC. Thank you. I'll take all pity applause. Nothing? Thank you. Thank you, Tamar. She goes, no, it's true. Honored to be here at the National Press Club, otherwise known as the Death Star to Trump administration. Too soon? Too soon? Too soon, my bad. Too soon. World Press Freedom Day, or as they say in Turkey, the Turkish journalists, inshallah, one day. Too soon? Too soon. Keeping it real. Just keeping it real. It's World Press Freedom Day. Got to stick up for my fellow journalists. Not the lawyers, though. In all honesty, today is an interesting day because it is the National Press Club. and I made a Star Wars analogy. And I was thinking about the Star Wars analogy, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to be the Death Star. I'd liken us to the Rebel Alliance, right? Resisting the Empire with goodness and lightsabers. And if indeed I was a Star Wars character, I thought about it, and I'm like, I'd like to be Obi-Wan, or Yoda, or Luke Skywalker. But honestly, I'd probably be Chewbacca. And the reason being, let's be honest, I keep it real, hairy, brown, loud, loyal, and oddly endearing. And thank you. And most likely circumcised. And speaking about circumcision and Jewish and Muslim alliance, I was thinking about, thank you. You like that transition? That's why they pay me the big money. I was, this is like a nice multicultural coalition of the Semites in this room today, gathering for a good cause. And I think, what would be our Star Wars avatar would be Chewbacca. And I thought, I was making a list with my wife, I'm like, what unites Muslim and Jews? Like top 3 reasons. And I thought, these are 3 things. Circumcision, intrusive mother-in-laws that force feed you, then tell you that you're fat after they've overfed you and made you fat. And 3, unusually large number of hairy middle-aged men in our communities. And so with that, I'm your Chewbacca of the evening. Thank you. Hold the applause. But in all seriousness, I am Wajahat Ali, an American Muslim of Pakistani descent, and nothing says popularity in 2017 America as American Muslim of Pakistani descent. Believe it or not, my name is not on any Disneyland keychains yet. You will not be able to share your Coke bottle with me yet. Yet my parents thought it would be hilarious to name their only child, growing up in Fremontastan, California, Wajahat. And this is a true story. And they didn't teach me English until I was 5, because who needs English in America? But thank you to America, I ended up graduating from UC Berkeley with an English major. So give it up. Yeah, give it up. Yes, thank you. However, growing up in America, in Fremontastan, California, as Wajahat Ali, the most mainstream name with the most mainstream identity ever, as the Chewbacca of the American populations, I never saw myself on television or on TV, except as fodder for Chuck Norris to kill, which I actually applauded in the 80s, because I'm like, kill him, Chuck Norris. And then later on, you're like, these movies are so racist, but so entertaining. On television, we existed finally in 1991, 1992 as Apu, which was a win, because as a 2-dimensional character, he had more dimensions than most characters that were on TV. And we were either tech support or we were extremists when we ended up as villains in Hollywood movies. And I always joke, and I joked about this in Josh's documentary, that any time I saw the Muslim and or Arab and or Muslimy villain terrorist, they always used to shoot bullets in the air and like yell a language I think which Arabic, which wasn't Arabic. And as a child of immigrants, I'm like, why are you wasting bullets? It just seemed very inefficient. That was like my main lament. I'm like, these are extremely inefficient, wasteful terrorists. Never had any personality, never had a girlfriend, and always used to die by the 3rd act. But growing up, you never saw yourself on TV, and you never saw your story being represented, and you never saw your mother who roots on the Golden State Warriors while wearing a sari and drinking chai and cursing at you in Urdu, right? And that was the experience of many of us. The stories of 1.7 billion Muslims and 1,400 years of Islamic civilization were reduced to a stock stereotype, often one with a lot of rage and anger and a lot of hairiness and brownness and bellicose rage and bad hygiene. And we joke about that, but in all seriousness, Gallup did a poll of about 1 billion Muslims that came out 7 years ago. And they said, what do you love about America? And believe it or not, they love American freedoms, American values, technology, education. Then they asked them, what do you dislike about America? Easy sell. First one, the discrepancy between U.S. foreign policy and our alleged values. You guys still with me? Number two grievance was the depiction of Islam and Muslims in U.S. media. All right? Take a guess here. When did Muslims first come to America? What century? You guys can throw in this. 18th? Warmish, but cold. Much warmer. 16th. There you go. Mr. Money. Mr. Money's got it. 16th century, 1500s, they say, from West Senegal, was the first interaction of Muslims on the soil. Some people say it was even earlier. But thanks to the slave trade, they say up to 5 to 25% of the slave trade that came here forcibly against its will was Muslim. So if you think about it, Muslim blood, labor, sweat, dreams, and hopes fertilized this country's soil. Now fast forward, take the DeLorean to 2017. Thank you for that. Thank you. Old man acknowledgement of that exquisite pop cultural reference to Back to the Future. The youth, she's sitting there like, what are you talking? What's a DeLorean? I'm a hipster. I'm cool. It's fine. One day you will be here and you'll make an exquisite reference to what show do you watch? Get Away with Murder. No one will know what you're talking about. We take it to 2017 America, and right now in 2017 America, the favorability rating of this thing called Islam and Muslims is lower than the month following the 9/11 attacks. And the 2016 FBI report said that there was a 67% increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes. And in fact, we're waiting for the newest year's report, which will probably spike. And the Southern Poverty Law Center said there's a 195% increase in anti-Muslim hate groups in the past year alone. We live in interesting times. Speaking of the media, out of 176 guests invited on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC to discuss President Trump's first travel ban targeting 7 Muslim-majority countries, how many were Muslim out of 176? Take a guess. 2. God, you guys are so cynical. 13, 12. Who said 13? Well done, nerd. 14. But do the math. That's less than 1%. That's less than 1%. This invisibility helps fuel what many say is a relentless anti-Muslim campaign that has become mainstream now. And in fact, regardless of your politics, I think it's safe to say, emanates from the White House. And there is an emergence of an anti-Muslim industry in America. So we live in interesting times. And Muslims want to emerge desperately as the protagonists of the American narrative. We have been here for 500 years. But oftentimes, we're relegated as sidekicks, as footnotes, as villains, and worst of all, excised completely from the history books. And so this is why the Goldziher Award is so important, because it acknowledges this urgency of these interesting times that we live in. This need and this dire importance for stories that show not avatars of perfection, such as the token moderate Muslim. I'm the moderate Muslim, by the way. And there's some also token Muslims here. Farhan Latif, the other moderate Muslim from Pakistan. I'm better than him. Sana Ullah, multimedia journalist. Hashtag, what's the hashtag? Places You'll Pray. Maggie Siddiqui, doing good work. My sister from Afghanistan, who I just met, who's a journalist, who interviewed me and had good Farsi. There you go. What's your name? Nazira. And that's it. No, hijab. First woman I've met named Hijab who doesn't wear hijab. I'm not even making this up. Her name is Hijab. She doesn't wear hijab. I love it. And an old school Muslim Pakistani godfather, uncle of power, Dr. Saeed Syed, right there. So give it up for these guys. You can feed us in hummus and guacamole and we'll be happy. But look, our stories, we're not avatars of perfection. We're not avatars of the Armageddon. We're just people. And these are the stories we're helping highlight with the Goldziher Prize. Excellent storytelling done by excellent journalists with excellent professional etiquette and ethics that show the nuances, the warts, the glories, the hopes, the dreams, and the biryani recipes of 1.7 billion people who are more than just ISIS or Osama or Barack. Thank you. Thank you to the whites for electing the Muslim president, Barack Hussein Obama. Just kidding. Not kidding. Thank you. Thank you. Couldn't have done it without you, sir. All right, so that's my spiel. You guys with me? Yeah. All right, great. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. That's why it's so important. And it's not just, puffery and good old, liberal propaganda and making us feel better. This is an urgent crisis with an urgent solution. And stories are the fuel that will help drive policy and help drive change, okay? If I haven't made the pitch for you enough in the last 3 minutes, I failed in life. But I already failed in life because I'm not a doctor, according to my Pakistani parents, so I'll go ahead with failure. But I am a licensed attorney. First up, we have my friend Josh Seftel. He is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. And believe it or not, Josh is also a failure in the Jewish American community because he started off as a pre-med student, and he left. I know, poor Josh. It's okay. Did you hear your mother's heart breaking when that happened? Yeah, she heard it. Okay. He currently lives in NYC. He's represented by CAA. He's kind of a big deal. He's also a feature filmmaker and made the comedy War, Inc. that starred John Cusack. He's also the filmmaker of the award-winning documentary about American campaign politics, taking on the Kennedys. But for our purposes today, he is recognized for The Secret Life of Muslims, which was a series that, I'll be honest, I consulted on, but I excised myself from the judging of this. I was fair, right? And so Josh Seftel, I want to introduce him because he jumped headlong into this, and we were trying to make The Secret Life of Muslims, which literally told short narratives and short films about the ordinary lives of ordinary Muslims, hopefully doing some extraordinary things, and it took us 7 years to get it off the ground. So give it up to Josh Seftel.
So this is the part where I have 5 minutes? Okay, great. Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to thank a lot of people. I want to thank the Center for Study of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Relations at Merrimack College. I'll confess that I grew up in Schenectady, New York, in the shadow of Union College, which was a hockey rival of Merrimack. And as a boy, every time Union played Merrimack, Merrimack won. So I always saw Merrimack as a rival and even a villain. So I'm trying to rethink this whole thing, and this is helping. So the first thing I want to say is that I am not the sole recipient of this award for my team. There were at least 30 people who worked on the project. When you make films, there are lots of people involved. And so there are producers, there are editors. Waj was a producer and consultant. A board of advisors. One of our advisors is here, Meryl Chertoff, and even my wife, Erica Frankel, who's sitting here, was a producer on the series. So there's a whole team of people, and so I'll tell you very briefly about the series, and then I'm going to show you one of the episodes. So the idea started, actually, Waj, it was only 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, I came across a statistic which Waj mentioned, which was that more than half of Americans have an unfavorable view of Muslims. And I immediately flashed back to my own childhood in upstate New York and remembered the discrimination that I faced as a young Jewish kid, growing up in a town where there weren't a ton of Jews. And I remember vividly having kids throwing pennies at me in the hallway. Someone threw a rock through the front window of our house at one point. We felt like the other. And then flash forward to now I'm a filmmaker, and I thought, looking at the statistic, there are stories to tell, and I can help tell them. And that's how the series started. So we worked very hard to raise money, and one of the reasons the series took 6 years is that we were not successful for the first few years in raising money to make the series. And then this 2016 presidential campaign heated up. And suddenly there was this rhetoric. I'm not going to name any names, but there was this rhetoric in the air, and there was a feeling that this topic had been pushed front and center. And at that point, we were able to raise money from the Ford Foundation, the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Arts, the New York Community Trust, and the Pillars Fund all stepped forward and gave us the money we needed. And so we made these films. And what we did is we created 15 films. Each one they're very short, and they were intended to be very shareable. We wanted to reach the biggest possible audience. And so each film is about 3 minutes long, and they were all intended to live on Facebook. And so I'm going to show you one of the 15 films right now, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the results of the series so far. So I don't know what it takes to have the film roll. It'll roll. Okay, great.
These two guys were standing behind us, and I'm clearly pregnant, and we've got our 2-year-old, and this guy was like, I wonder what she's hiding under there. I wish I could rip that fucking thing off her fucking head. You know, knowing that I could hear him.
When Mona and I met, it was 2012. I mean, it's hard not to be corny and sentimental, but you know, for me, it was really love at first sight. Islamophobia just wasn't the thing that it is today. I don't know if I would have converted as readily or as publicly now as I did then. I kind of experience these two different cities when I go out now. Like, I spend most of the day with Safi, and the world is just this kind of friendly, you know, great place. And going out with Mona, people are not shy about staring.
Sebastian's like, oh, this is my wife, Mona. People are like, oh, nice to meet you, Muslim lady.
The FBI now believes the massacre in San Bernardino was an act of foreign-inspired terrorism.
Shootings in Paris in 2 or 3 locations.
After San Bernardino and the Paris attacks, it was really intense.
As soon as we heard about the event, there was hardly time to mourn before it was bracing for the backlash.
There was a significant rise in Islamophobic hate crimes.
Just this afternoon, there was a fire at a mosque in Southern California. It is the latest in a string of violence directed at Muslims.
We didn't leave the house for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks.
I had this sense of this kind of blanket of dread.
We felt like we had to do something to you know, replace some of that trauma with love and connection. We were like, how do we get people to talk to us?
Right.
And so it was like, we bribed them with donuts.
I kind of had this idea of Lucy and her lemonade stand, the psychiatrist thing, this very homemade thing. We took our son with us. We took my mom's dog with us, 3 big boxes of coffee and 3 dozen donuts.
So many people were like, don't do it. You're basically putting a bullseye on yourselves.
We set up, and there was kind of this little inhale of, you know, what's gonna happen.
Do you guys want some donuts?
The very first person, this kid walked up and he said, I just want you to know I'm Muslim and I think what you're doing is really cool. You know, and I just felt this this kind of tingle.
And the very next woman walked up to us with eyes full of tears saying, I'm so sorry for what your community is having to suffer through right now.
Give you a hug.
A lot of people, they'd come up and they'd say, I don't really know what to ask, but can I have a donut? It was like, yeah, you can have a donut, you know. And
some people really asked you, where's
the Muslim? I want to talk. I'm like, oh yeah, right here. What should I ask you? Ask us about our son. We're trying to potty train him. Ask us about potty training. Ask us about, you know, the Red Sox.
That exchange meant everything. Nice talking to you guys. It was a lot of curiosity and a lot of joy. But after that very first day that we went out, I posted just a picture of us standing in front of the signs that said, keep your heads up, Muslims of America. Friends kept sharing it, and then their friends shared it, and eventually it just went crazy viral. NPR was calling me, and the Boston Globe and Huffington Post and People Magazine and Al Jazeera.
Mona Haydar wants to fight fear with free donuts and dialogue.
The hashtag Ask a Muslim, it's still going on college campuses and at functions and events all over the country. You know, people will just set up Ask a Muslim. It's that magic connection that I want to be the lasting thing from Ask a Muslim.
Is your dog?
Yeah, that's Ben Ben.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
So once we had these films, we said, what do we do with them? And, you know, we wanted to reach as many people as possible. So we set up partnerships with Vox, with USA Today, with PRI's The World, which is a public radio show, and with CBS Sunday Morning. And all of them distributed this content. And so it was a kind of unconventional way to do it, but since Election Day, we've had over 27 million views. So thank you so much for giving me a chance to share this with you all, and I'm very honored to be here. Thanks.
And also, for those of you who don't know, the featured story of Mona, since the release of the video, she's also gone viral again because she's done a rap video about hijab. And that was just last month. So she took that and made a rap video, which went viral as well. Check it out. It's Mona Haydar's rap. And so now she's a rapper. This is the world we live in. It's awesome. Josh gets husband equity for thanking the wife. Well done, Josh. And for not wearing a tie. I appreciate that. Here's another stat. How many Americans say they don't know a Muslim? What percentage?
70.
That's very warm, very hot. 65. 65% of Americans say they don't know a Muslim, even though Muslims have been here for 400 plus years. They say the rise of anti-Muslim bigotry is mainly, there's a lot of factors, but two core factors is most Americans say they don't know a Muslim or anything about Muslims or Islam, so ignorance. But what they do know about Islam and Muslims, they mostly get from where? The media. Is it positive or negative? Mostly negative. That's the reality we live in. However, there are individuals who work in influential media spaces, currently called the enemy of the American people. The Nye Times. Let's not name it's Voldemort, so let's not fully name it. And Samuel Freedman is a gentleman who I think is very proud of his Jewish American background, is very sensitive to the lived realities of religious communities in this country, has spent tremendous time doing very nuanced reporting and articles for the Nye Times when it comes to American Muslims and how they're navigating their identity and their faith with other faith groups. He's an American author, journalist, and currently a professor at the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. He has authored 6 nonfiction books. He's won tons of awards. It's like this so long. He's won tons of awards. What did I miss? What else do you want? It's fine. He's married. His wife is here. She seems to like him. She likes him. We first met, I think, 4 years ago when I was wearing my lawyer hat in Chicago, where we were on a panel talking about the rise of Islamophobia, and I was talking about the Islamophobia industry, and you were talking about how to tackle it from the media landscape. And that was actually our first and only published law review article, because that conversation was transcribed, and so congratulations, we're in law review. Hooray! Talk about Islamophobia. But Sam's a great guy. He's doing fantastic work, and he's had a rich career of doing this. And for the accumulation of all these stories that he has done throughout his career, he is the recipient of the Goldziher Prize in 2017. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you. First of all, I say to you all, shalom and salam alaikum, and peace be upon us all. It's an incredible honor to be here, and I have to thank from the deepest part of my heart Merrimack College and John Kaiser and the foundation that has supported this important work by all of us. It's an incredible honor to share an award and a stage with journalists as extraordinary as Josh Seftel and Robin Wright, whose work I've been following really my whole life, growing up as a baby journalist up to being an aging journalist. And before I go any further, I'll also say that my wife, Chris, who is here, is, I would say, the audience of one, and she was with me on many of the road trips, the reporting trips that led to these columns, and is always the first reader of whatever I do. And also to have the introduction by Wajahat Ali. One thing you've all picked up tonight is he's an incredible social satirist. in the tradition of one of my heroes, Lenny Bruce. But I knew him even before we met at that conference at Chicago Kent Law School through his incredible investigative reporting about the Islamophobia industry that I came upon in the course of doing actually one of the columns that was part of my awards submission. So don't let the humor trick you into thinking of him only as a satirist and a wit. The man has incredible depth. And so to be singled out by him means an enormous amount as well. But you did steal one of my lines, because I spent this afternoon refreshing my memory about the etymology of the phrase enemy of the people. It's a phrase that goes back to the terror that followed the French Revolution and was later intoned by the likes of Lenin and Stalin, and we know who has uttered it most recently. But what I want to say on World Press Freedom Day is that when we're being called by the likes of those who've called us this over history, enemies of the people, that's when we know we're doing the Lord's work. That's when no, it's absolutely the right time, and there's never been a better time to be doing journalism than to be doing it right now. In the same spirit, I've been working as a professional journalist since the summer of 1975, summer after my sophomore year of college. And there's hardly anything I've done that I consider more important than the columns I wrote for the New York Times about the real lives of American Muslims. That column is what in Times parlance is called a reported column, which means it's not an op-ed. I can't just say, here's my opinion, but it's also not a feature story where I'm obliged to totally detach myself. But as a result, I would choose my spots when I felt I wanted to be more observational and when I wanted, through my reporting, to make a point. And I was very aware, actually even before I started doing the religion column and I was doing one on education, that history was going to look on what we did as journalists. I'm mindful here in Washington that there used to be a great journalist in town. He won the Pulitzer Prize, named James Kilpatrick. For a while he was on 60 Minutes. I loved the way he used language when I was a college journalist. But history will never forget the fact that he wrote against the civil rights movement. History will never fail to hold him to account for being a defender of segregation. And for someone like him, and journalists who fail to meet the moral standard now, that will rightly overshadow everything else, including how well you use the language and how artful a phrase you can turn. And in this time of rising hatred of Muslims and the othering of them, the stereotyping of them, the physical attacks on them, I felt that this was an issue that I wanted to take a stand on, that I didn't want someday to look back on myself, to have my kids, and someday hopefully grandkids will look back on what I had done and say, you wrote well, but you failed the test of history. And I felt that there was plenty of journalism being written about radicalization, about the statistically rare but shocking acts of terror, but very little being done about the ordinary lives of Muslims in this country. And I've done some crossing of boundaries in my reporting life. I've written a book about an African-American church. I've written a book about black college football and the civil rights movement. And I would say to Muslim Americans, as I said to the African Americans in those cases, you sure don't need me to validate your lives. Your lives have intrinsic value before I ever came around. And there are extraordinary Muslim American journalists, some of whom are my students at Columbia. I have 3 Muslim students in a class of 16 this semester, 2 Somali Americans from Minneapolis, 1 American convert who grew up in Tucson, Arizona, that they're going to tell their own stories and have been telling their own stories, and they don't need me to do it. But if you're a woke white person, or if you're a woke non-Muslim, then part of the obligation of being woke is to wake others. And it's sad to say that non-Muslim readers may give more credit, sadly, to an honest, nuanced portrait of Muslim life coming from me than from Wajahat Ali or my students Mukhtar Ibrahim and others I've had over the years, Omar Suleiman, the many, many Muslim American students I've had. But I did feel from the beginning this was the moral calling. And I appreciate the fact that the Goldziher people let me slightly extend the limit for submissions, which I think was 2014 to 2016. I pushed it back to 2010 because I very much wanted to include a couple of earlier columns, including one about the fact that there was a Muslim prayer room in the Twin Towers. But also for me, this began really in 2004 when I was doing the education column for the Times, and I went out to Dearborn, Michigan to write about the high school football team trying to make the state playoffs, and the heart of the season fell during Ramadan and vice versa. And I wrote about the Muslim players on that football team who would fast all day, go to class, do football practice, and only after the sun went down, it was before daylight savings time had ended, so it would be like 7:30 at night, finally get to eat. And we're trying to be faithful, observant Muslims and be a great football team at the same time. By the way, you've never seen any human beings as hungry as those players when the coach had them for a barbecue one day. Like the minute it was, sundown, it was like the stampede. But those are the stories I wanted to tell about ordinary life, not to create cartoonish superhero Muslims, the idealized person who can never really exist, but real people on that football team, the two Muslim teenagers who wrote a book about being a Muslim teenager in this country, the Muslim chaplain at Augsburg College outside Minneapolis, the Muslim activist in Los Angeles who worked with the local police department to try to do more sophisticated, understanding type of police work, all of those things. And to have this work singled out means everything to me. It's one of the things that I will say my whole life was worth it for, and I just bow down in thanks and homage to you all.
Thank you, Sam. Your check's in the mail. This is a racket. This is a Muslim-Jewish racket. He introduces me, praises me, I praise him. Swap hummus recipes. It's fine. I just want to say, if this is streaming, that Samuel Freedman said woke. Can we tweet that? All right. Twice he said woke. I was like, did he just say? Yes, he did, and he used it accurately in the sentence. And also, Samuel Freedman would like to apologize to all children of immigrants. The parents of the immigrant parents of his students. He has single-handedly radicalized an entire generation because they went to become doctors in Columbia, and they took Sam's class, became journalists, went and told their parents just wept openly, and he's the man to blame for a generation of radicalized immigrant parents in America. So, well done, sir. Well done. Keep destroying dreams. Speaking of radicalization, look, we have positive stories, there's also negative stories. We live in a world of violence and uncertainty, and that is also a story that we have to tell, but oftentimes those stories are not told with sensitivity and depth and nuance. And yes, extremism is a problem, and to not admit it would be akin to burying our heads in the sands. But how do you tell those stories in a way which captures, and like you said, the word nuances? And speaking of radicalization and the communities and how do their families behave, and what are the policies that are in place that create certain situations, and how we as Americans are absorbing this, and how we can do better, well, you need someone to navigate this very rich, explosive terrain. And thankfully, we have journalists like Robin Wright. She plays Claire on House of... No, sorry, wrong. That's all I wanted to do. I'm done for the day. I just wanted to do that. Thank you. Is this the first time that ever happened? No. She's like... Robin's like, I will hurt you later. I know Josh, I know Sam, and I thought I knew Robin. I met her for the first time, and I'm like, Robin, finally we meet. And she goes, who are you? This was 45 minutes ago. And I'm like, we email. She goes, huh, okay. And so I've been a fan of your work, Robin Wright. And this bio is so long, but I'll give you something. She has reported from over, guess how many countries? Want to take a guess? 50, cold. 110, warmer. 100, are you your agent or a publicist? 140. Yes, 140 countries on 6 continents. You can applaud that. She's still alive. She has written for the Los Angeles Times, New York Times Magazine, Washington Post, Enemy of the People, The Atlantic, Sunday Times of London, Foreign Affairs, Christian Science Monitor, and currently she's writing for this small little paper called The New Yorker. She has won so many awards that if I spent time reading it, we'd be here for 30 more minutes and we're running out of time. But give it up for Robin Wright, who has reported from these countries about these communities with the depth, sensitivity, and nuance. Robin Wright.
Thank you. I hope the White House correspondents reach out to you next year for the entertainment. That was phenomenal. You're a great MC. I could listen to you all night. I want to join everyone, my fellow honorees in thanking Merrimack College for their extraordinary commitment and their vision in tackling this with credibility and sensitivity, and encouraging journalists to cover one of the most important subjects of the early 21st century. I first learned about Islam in the 7th grade in social studies. We spent a week doing all the great religions of the world, 1 hour every day. We did Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Shintoism, Buddhism, a couple of others, all in 1 week, 1 hour. And that was my experience, my knowledge, until I landed in the Middle East on October 6, 1973, which was the day the Fourth Middle East War broke out. And I am a lifelong war correspondent. That's my thing. That's why, in fact, I tend to land someplace and war does break out, to the point my father said he didn't dare go to Bermuda on vacation with me because there'd surely be a coup d'etat. And he wasn't wrong. I've just come back from Mosul. So anyway, I looked at the Middle East in terms of conflict, and my father had been the commander who had liberated Ordruff, which was the first American liberated concentration camp in World War II. And so my perspective as a child growing up in a place like Ann Arbor, Michigan, was very skewed. Even though we were close to Dearborn, close to the largest Muslim American community, I had very limited knowledge. And so I learned on the ground. And my father was very wise. The one thing he taught me, he was a great law professor, he said to understand any problem, any issue, you have to stand on top of the world and look down. And so it was, in looking at the Arab-Israeli conflict, learning about the other half of the conflict and learning about the cultural environment, whether it was the Arabs or the Persians. And it was transformative to me, learning slowly at a time, covering the Iranian Revolution, and Islam became an idiom of modern political opposition and then governance, and tracking the first extremists. I lived in Beirut for 5 years and lost friends at the first suicide bomber ever against an American target in Beirut. I can still hear the bomb go off in my head in Beirut when the U.S. lost the largest, at the Marine Peacekeeper compound, the largest loss of U.S. military life in any single incident since World War II, and that is still true today despite Afghanistan and Iraq. All of the hostages taken were my friends. So I've seen the hard side of the phenomena. And yet what has resonated with me everywhere I've been is the softness and the embrace of Islam by Muslims of other cultures. I every year get Christmas cards from Muslims quoting from the Quran about the birth of Jesus. For those of you who don't know, the only woman named, literally named in the Quran is the Virgin Mary. And it was such an eye-opener to me to learn literally on the ground. And so I am kind of an outlier in this. I don't really cover Muslims in America. But because of a sequence of events, I ended up writing about Muslims in America over the last year and a half. And I really wanted to pay tribute to them and tell you what I learned from them. I was inspired right after the Democratic Convention when I went I heard Khizr Khan, and I decided to go to Humayun Khan's grave in Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery. And here's a young man who intercepted an orange taxi that was speeding toward his base in Iraq, and he jumped in front of it and told his fellow soldiers to hit the dirt. He was killed, and they survived. Khan's headstone is not the only one at Arlington marked with a star and a crescent. Muslims are not unusual in the U.S. military. In fact, almost 4,000 Muslims serve today in the U.S. military. There are an estimated 2,000 who serve as reservists or in the National Guard. And it's not a new trend. Yusuf Ben Ali, an Arab of North African descent, fought in George Washington's army. Muslims fought in the War of 1812 and the Civil War on both sides. 5,000 Muslims fought in World War I. There were so many, 41 different spellings of Muhammad. I actually don't know how you'd find 41 variations on the name Muhammad, but they are all recorded in U.S. military records. Muslims also fought in World War II and Korea and Vietnam and Afghanistan and Iraq. Muslims fought in the U.S. military for 2 centuries, but they weren't allowed to have their first Muslim chaplain until 1993. Arlington National Cemetery actually doesn't know how many Muslims are buried there because they didn't start counting until 2013. They only have recorded 14 Muslims, even though many of the graves are marked with a star and a crescent. And every grave is on their website, and they've never bothered to count. They only have recorded 14, and Humayun Khan is not one of them, even though he is the best known Muslim soldier in America now. I also think of people like Mohammed Musri, an imam in Florida who emerged after the Orlando shooting in June to condemn the attack as monstrous, to appeal to Muslims to donate blood, as many did for the wounded, and to call on other Muslims to help Florida police and the FBI. And Nihad Awad of the Council on American Islamic Relations, the largest Muslim rights and advocacy group in the United States, who publicly scolded ISIS for its ties to the attack, who said publicly, "You do not speak for us," who said, "You do not represent us, you are an aberration, and you are outlaws." He said, 1.7 billion people are united in rejecting your extremism and your acts of senseless violence. I also think of Hannah Khan, and I loved writing about her. She's the author of It's Ramadan, Curious George. It's a groundbreaking children's book that was written to span the cultural chasm for a new generation. In her book, Curious George gets up to his usual antics, this time planning a good deed by picking up all the shoes left outside the mosque to donate them to a charity. He stopped in the nick of time. George and a Muslim friend break bread at the end of Ramadan, the fast, with pizza and chocolate-covered bananas. In honor of Ramadan, the man in the yellow hat, the caregiver who brought Curious George to America 75 years ago, dons a yellow fez. I also think of Ibtihaj Muhammad. Goodness always makes me cry. Do you have a tissue? Napkin? Thanks. Who was a 3-time All-American fencer at Duke and who competed on Team USA at the Olympics last summer, where she medaled for the United States. She was also the first American ever to compete wearing the hijab. And finally, I think of Parvez Sharma, a gay Muslim filmmaker best known for his movie, The Love Jihad. If you think it's hard to be Muslim in America and to be an ethnic minority, think how hard it is to be a Muslim ethnic minority gay. The United States may be home to more than 250,000 Muslims who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersex, or queer. And all of these people have been so brave in helping us understand their own identity at a time of unprecedented ignorance. I remember I was in Bellingham, Washington, on my way back to this Washington, and there were 5 Sikhs in front of me in the security line, and one of them had a turban on, and a kind of pimply-faced young TSA agent saw the turban, and he pulls the guy aside and to be questioned. And I said to the other 4 Sikhs, knowing who they were, this must really annoy you. And the one in front of me said, what the TSA agent doesn't know is that he's a prison guard in Canada. So anyway, I have, tripped into this subject. I feel enriched in my life by having crossed paths with many Muslims, learning from their experience, and being inspired by their courage and their bravery. Thank you.
Well, goodness makes Robin cry, but goodness is also worth a round of applause for all of these people doing good work and good stories. It's a good group, right? It was well done. All right, so we got tears, we have hummus, we have laughter, we have applause, and they've given me a whopping 6 minutes to have a conversation with these 3 distinguished storytellers. I can't even say my name in 6 minutes, but this will be interesting. A 6-minute conversation in the National Press Club with 3 award-winning journalists. It's just teasing you and then mocking you. It's just like mockery. This is what it is. But let's see if I can fire off a question. Maybe if we can get off 2. I'll make it personal, the first one for you guys. What compelled you as non-Muslims, because none of you are Muslims yet. I'm just kidding. Inshallah. Dr. Sayed, do a dua. I'm just kidding. We'll accept you for now. To dive into the narrative minefield of Islam and American Muslims, one which is rife with trolling, anti-Muslim bigotry, death threats, and fatwas. And yet you still went into it as a non-Muslim. So what made you get into it, and specifically how did you engage these stories, knowing full well that you're not Muslim and you have the weighty responsibility because you're in privileged positions of the Nye Times, New Yorker, Seftel Productions, to tell stories of communities that often don't get the spotlight?
I think I answered part of that before about feeling that I didn't want to be on the wrong side of history. But when you cross any line, you have to go there with a great deal of humility. I once told the pastor of the black church I wrote about that I was coming to him tabula rasa, and he used to love retelling that story of saying, Sam said his tabula was a whole lot of rasa. So I think in that spirit, and also why to dive into that field of hate, because we're known by our enemies.
I was terrified when we started the series, and so I surrounded myself with an amazing board of advisors, including you, and I said, I just asked millions of questions. How do we do this? How do we do this the right way? And at a certain point, right before we started filming, I realized it's just about telling powerful stories, and it doesn't matter who they're about. It's the same rules of storytelling and journalism. And once I realized that, it became much easier, and I sort of lost the fear and just went ahead and tried to make meaningful films.
Robin, you're going to have to... Tears won't get you out
No,
of
no,
this.
no. I'm an
Not this.
historian by training, and the chance to cover history be a chronicler of contemporary history is what really always inspired me to go to war zones. And because the Middle East, I've been in other parts of the world, but the Middle East keeps sucking you back. And I think the one thing that's so basic to all of our reporting is that, you know, you sent me a funny note after I knew this story that commenting was going to come back to bite me. And Waj sent me his email after we'd had this little conversation, said, I'm the brown one, you know. And
this was 30 minutes ago, by the way.
Yeah. And I just want to say, you know, this is the 21st century. You know, this is humanity. And for any of us to be what your color, your gender, your dress style, you know, it just strikes me as bizarre that we're even talking about it. So we need to move beyond that. And I think what we're all three committed to in different ways, or have come to our own kind of discovery, is that the one contribution we can make is to help us move on in the 21st century, in every way, not just the Islamic world, but for all of us in every culture, every religion, every ethnicity.
No, thank you for the layup, because you set me up perfectly for my final question with the 2 minutes that we have left. And speaking about moving on, also addressing certain problems, if you allow me to editorialize for a second. In an ideal world, what you're saying is absolutely correct. What should it matter? Color of your skin, gender, if your name is Hussein, Obama, the character, the deeds, the behavior should be the merits by which we are judged, correct? I think most people would say. However, especially in the United States of America, with our alleged values and pluralism and our Constitution and these great statements and memes and hashtags and tweets that represent the American identity, that is a melting pot, which I don't like melting into anyone, so say a tossed salad, a bouillabaisse, a mosaic, yes, tapestry of different ethnicities and narrative stories. But we're not living in that country yet. It's still a rough draft. And you know, race divides us, gender divides us, religion divides us. And personalizing this, and speaking on moving forward, I'll tell you as a person of color who happens to be of the Muslim persuasion, I've been very lucky in that in Hollywood and journalism and think tanks that I've seen the wizards behind the curtain. And the wizards are exceedingly white and oftentimes male. Nothing against white males. Some of our best friends are white males. I love white males. Okay, done. Moving on. There's not malice there, there's not racism there, there's not bitterness there, but it's still a very monochromatic gatekeeper world, okay? Number one. Number two, from my own communities, if I may self-audit, many Muslims send their children, as you know, for other immigrant communities, doctor, engineer, businessman, failure. But the talent exists. The talent exists. And I had a very well-known editor, I won't name him because he's well-intentioned, say, I would love to publish more Muslims who are of high caliber, such as Sam and Robin. They just don't exist. And he wasn't even trying to be offensive. He's just like, I don't know where they are. They don't exist. There's Robins, there's Sams, but where's the Browns, the brown Robin, or the Muslimy Sam, right? And the third problem I would say, connecting the dots, is the stories that then come out, especially about Islam and Muslims, either good Muslim, bad Muslim. Good Muslim is he or she that makes you feel safe and secure, and bad Muslim is ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, Duck Dynasty. Because honestly, who looks more like ISIS, Duck Dynasty or me? I look like tech support. All right, just throwing it out there for those of you who want to racially profile. So to me, it seems like a chain, right? Within our communities, we're not doing a good enough job of nurturing and nourishing these journalists and storytellers, but they exist. When you get to the gatekeepers, and I've worked in television, Hollywood, and journalism, it's a very white male world. They aren't malicious. And then because of this monochromatic vision that exists within the boardrooms, the stories that you get are very monochromatic when it comes to good Muslim and bad Muslim. You guys are experts. You guys have navigated this terrain. You've been very successful. What's a way forward connecting the dots? What are the recommendations that you can give the influencers in this room? How do we get the right people in the room, and how do we get the people in the room, the gatekeepers, to open up their ears and listen and get more stories out there? I know I asked you a big thesis question, but moving forward, I wanted to connect the dots and see if you guys have some tangible solutions to this. And pardon me, I know it's a lot, but with the 2 minutes that we have left, I think we can end on a positive note moving forward. And also, get out your smartphones, people, because apparently this is being live streamed. Only 3 people are tweeting. Hashtag Goldziher. As they're giving you suggestions, tweet out stuff. Tweet out about the laughter, the circumcision jokes, the hummus. We're trying to generate support for round 2. Take it away.
This actually makes me think of my life as a Columbia professor, in which I've served several years on a task force about increasing the diversity in all sorts of ways, both in hiring and also in retention, in people getting tenure. And it's come up within the journalism school, even in terms of reading lists and guest speakers. And when I say it's just all about being intentional, most white Americans, including me, if you think of your innermost circle, the other academics you know, the other authors and journalists you know, a lot of them, a disproportionate number compared to society at large, are going to be white, and if you're male, are going to be male. But it takes only about 30 seconds to sit there and think, who else is really good? Who else do I know? How can I get outside that immediate convenience zone? It's not even a comfort zone, it's just what's convenient. And then it isn't hard to do at all. There's a great op-ed column by the novelist Viet Nguyen the other day that addressed this issue in terms of the Vietnam War, and Anglo-American critics who had said, gee, you know, Viet Nguyen's book, The Sympathizer, is great, which it is, because we've never had books about the Vietnam War from the Vietnamese standpoint before. And Viet Nguyen wrote this op-ed that listed probably 25 of them. So they've been hiding in plain sight, and all you have to do is be intentional. And if you're talking about newsrooms and news organizations, all you have to do is do what we're supposed to do, which is report and find out where the talented people are, and then hire them and let them do what they do.
You have to be woke.
Since we have so little time, I'd only say the 3 of us are the transition figures. You are the future.
Well, thank you for that. And there's still life left. There's still life left for you. We are the future. How about that, everyone? Include yourselves in this. Include yourself also. You are the future. Well, I'm going to be learning from you, so that's not an excuse not to return my emails, Robin Wright. She goes, I'm the past. You're the future. Thank you for that. Josh.
Well, as a transition figure.
You're not in transition. You guys aren't going anywhere. This is like when my mom says we might not be around for much longer. Like God gives them 10 more years of life. So you guys are going to be along for a long time. Josh.
Well, speaking from a movie and TV point of view, which is part of what I do, I think we're about this far away from having the Muslim version of Modern Family. Something like that is going to happen really soon, whether it's a movie or a TV show. And I think that that's going to have probably more impact than anything we could do in journalism. We'll see. I hope that it happens soon, but I think that's going to be the game changer.
And you mentioned that how it's a game changer. I know we're out of time, but just really quick, just tell people, because I've been on the receiving end of this, how those small little videos you made, like there were like 6 or 7, right? How they just changed people's perceptions, the secret life of Muslims, of like otherwise people, like just the stories that you showed on. Because a lot of people just don't watch TV anymore, right? You get on smartphone, you get it on Twitter, you get it on Facebook, and these videos that you made literally changed people's perceptions in like 3 minutes.
Well, the video I showed tonight has, I think at this point, has over 4 million views alone. And something happens where people see a story like that and they're hungry for it, and it gets shared and shared and shared. And the kinds of comments that we see on the videos like this, a lot of them are negative, but the positive ones, some of our favorites are ones that sort of fit what we've been talking about all night, like things like, hi, I live in the Midwest. I've never met a Muslim, but now I feel like I have. Thank you for this video. That's literally one of the posts we got. And we got another one from someone who said she tagged her mother, and she said, Mom, you need to watch this video. And I think that's where it all begins.
Give it up to these guys. Apologies for going 5 minutes over. The Goldziher crew's freaking out. So to end this off, we will invite Mr. Joe Kelly back and Mr. Kaiser himself, who helped funded this award. You're coming up to the stage. Give it up for this man. Sorry that was so late.
None of this is possible without this gentleman, chair of the William and Mary Grieve Foundation in New York, and native. Oh no, you're not native to Virginia, but you've been there for long enough. Native American. Native American. You just give them the. Okay. Just give them the money, John. Just give them the.
Women first, right?
Sure.
Okay, Robin. Go get. She's on the bottom. Okay, well, they're fungible, right? Okay. Robin. Samuel G. Freedman of Freedman. And Seftel, sounds like a telephone company. You got one of them coming along too? Oh, indeed, this
Thank you again. Your presence here honors these individuals and their work. Thank you to all who are tuning in through the live stream, and good night. Be well. God bless.